Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hey, it was probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. I did a review on my Banyan versus my Chameleon, both made by Dutchware. One's a bridge hammock and one is a gathered end hammock. And ultimately I came away from that review with the basic concept. It really wasn't worth it for the added weight and the possibility of, having gear failures like with the spreader bars or with your tarp getting a hole poked in it. Little things like that just wasn't worth it for me to deal with. And so ultimately I decided I was going to sell that hammock. So I put the hammock up on the forums to sell it, and Just Bill contacted me, that's his forum name, contacted me and asked me if I would do a trade with him. He makes hammocks. I've heard of his hammocks. I've seen them a couple times, but never really pulled the trigger on getting one. And I thought, man, this could be the perfect time for it. So I don't know. I figured I had really nothing to lose, so I said, yeah, I'll send you my Banyan, and you can send me one of your hammocks, and I'll test it out and see what I think of it. So we made the trade. I was able to pick out exactly what I wanted. He sent it to me, and I've been using it for about maybe a year now. On and off, a little bit in my garage, some out in the parks and little adventures. And then ultimately, I took it on a week-long trip to the Canadian wilderness with my buddy Carl and Chuck. You can watch that video. Had a great adventure, and I really got a lot of use out of it during that week-long adventure in the Canadian wilderness. So did this thing change my mind on the bridge hammocks? Stick around, find out. Alright guys, the first step is the weight. Let's see how much this thing weighs. Here's the hammock itself, with the bug net and everything in there already. At 1 pound, 2.5 ounces. We gotta, of course, have our ultralight poles at 5.5 ounces, so a total of 1 pound, 8 ounces. And then for my control, I always use my Chameleon by Dutchware. This is my staple hammock, just a gathered end hammock. And that's sitting at 1 pound, 4.7 ounces. So about a 3 ounce difference between the two setups. All right, let's get this thing set up. All right, guys, there's the hammock. I'm going to go through this real quick, just to give you some stats on it. Got the bug net pulled off to the side right now, but this is built out of a 1.2 hybrid material. I chose the orange, and then I have the black accents right there. I also chose every ultralight option I could. Some of the things that were changed out. So these spreader bars, normally they are like 43 inches, I think, for the normal version. I opted for the ultralight medium, and that means that it cuts it down to 36 inches at the head end. The foot end is always 36 inches. The spreader bars themselves are downsized to a 5/8 inch, and normally they're 3/4 to hold up a lot more weight. Up at my connection points, I changed out carabiners for soft loops. I have tried it both with the carabiner and with my soft loops, and it works out great either way. The reason why I wanted the soft loops was A, they do cut down on weight, and then B, they allow me to make a Beckett hitch with my spider straps here that weigh pretty much nothing. Alright, so this hammock has its suspension actually go all the way from up here, and it actually goes through the entire body. It doesn't just stop here. where a lot of them do. It continues all the way through as one piece. To cut down on some weight, I had it changed out from an AM steel to this Dynaglide, and the Dynaglide has not had any problems. It's a lighter weight version. With all of those ultralight options put together, this can only hold up to 175 pounds. So if you're not a smaller guy, it will be tough to get all the options I got. However, he can obviously work with you to up that rating, depending on what fabric you're using, what kind of poles you're using. Those will probably be the two factors you'll have to change out. The main reason you're going to want to be looking at this hammock, guys, is because of the location of the spreader bars. They place them where your shoulders are instead of behind your head. So with the spreader bar going across your shoulders like this, what it does is it makes it so where your shoulders are is the most amount of outward pressure. And what that does is it keeps the fabric from wanting to fold in on you. So there's virtually no shoulder squeeze whatsoever while laying completely flat at the same time. It's excellent for that. Now, the other big bonus, and the main reason why I personally was really drawn to this hammock, is because I have the ability to sleep on my stomach. Let me show you. All right, guys, so as you can kind of see, there's this fabric here that kind of comes down right here. And what that does is it allows me to put my pillow over here and put my arms around it just like I would at home if I was sleeping on my stomach. And now my head, when I lay it all the way down on my pillow, is no longer cranked up like this, hurting my neck and my back. It's actually nuzzled right down in, just like this. So the negative to having a setup like this with the spreader bar like this is it is in your way. If you notice, it's pretty close to my body and it's right in line to where I'm going to want to make any moves. And you can see I'm a small guy and I can still rub up against that if I'm not careful. So you have to be conscious of that as you sleep. Also, when you wake up, you have to bring your head through like that, or I grab the sides of this and I kind of shimmy my way down, and that kind of lets me get out. But this is in your way a little bit. Is it enough in my way where it's so annoying I don't want to deal with it? No, it's really not that bad. And I have bumped it. I have bumped this a few times, and it's never been a problem. So that's the main reason you're going to want to look at this hammock, is for this setup. So if you're okay with the spreader bar kind of being there and you really want a stomach sleep, this hammock is something to look at. Let's kind of go over some of the other features and details of the hammock. All right, so one of the main features of bridge hammocks in general is you have a spreader bar, and they typically have an end like this poking through it. And obviously, if you've watched any of my other reviews on the Banyan, that was one of my biggest pet peeves, is how is there not a design that would protect this end from possibly being poked into your Cuban fiber tarp. They're expensive. I want to use my Cuban fiber tarp. I don't want to have to downgrade to something heavier just because I'm worried about poking a hole into it. This hammock has the ability to use these buttons. They're not made by Bill. He gets them from Fugal Innovations, which you can buy them yourself as well. But these buttons basically go in there and they just make it so it's got a round end. So when the wind is pushing your tarp in, it's not hitting this part right here and poking a hole in. Instead, it's hitting this. Same thing when you get in the hammock. When you get in the hammock, you're going to notice that this will swing up a little bit. And it could poke, that end could poke into your tarp and put a hole in it. So these really help quite a bit. Bill did not really feel that they were necessary. So Bill sends out these little plastic tips, and he felt that this would be just as good. And what you do is you just put it on here like this, and then that will soften any sort of punctures. I personally don't think that that's good enough for me, and Bill was totally fine with letting me test out these buttons. He did warn me that he felt you could come into problems with how secure this and this making a connection is, because you could accidentally have this pop out. And if it pops out, it could poke a hole into your hammock. So that's what he was afraid of. And he also did some testing when I did some testing, and found that he was actually able to break one of these. So I've had absolutely no problems with this setup at all. And so I personally think they're worth it, and I would not hesitate to install them on your hammock. Now let's take a look at the underquilt setup. This is kind of a bittersweet setup. It does allow me to use my hammock gear underquilts that I use for my gathered end hammocks. However, you have to do a couple things to try to make them work correctly. So up at the head end here, you've got this connection point here. I've been hooking it up to this, but I believe you can just as easily hook it up here. But either way, however you want to connect it, it gets on there. And then what you have is you've got this other Prusik, or this other knot, Prusik knot, with these two connections. And what that does is it takes your suspension system in your underquilt and it lifts it up. And by pulling it up, it allows it to get a better seal to your body. The next part of this setup is you've got this ridgeline connection here that goes down, and it connects to the underquilt right here. It's got these little clips here. And what this does is it pulls up wherever you have a gap in your hammock. And with that pulling up on it, it helps to get a seal. This shot cord that's right here also gets in your way when you're trying to get in and out of the hammock. So it's probably best to be down here or in the middle holding up any sections that I need. I have it down here because I find that it's easy for me to swing in and swing out without it being in my way. But it's something to keep in mind. This can kind of get in your way and be a little bit of an annoyance. With everything being hooked up that way, you can kind of get a good seal and everything looks good. But it's not really perfect, and there is a lot of variability for getting a perfect seal on the underquilt. And there's people who have definitely had quite a lot of trouble, including myself, getting it to work right. Now, after messing around with all of the different connection points, I was able to get really good seal on it, but I would not consider this a winter hammock. I took this out in Canada with Carl and Chuck, and I think it got down to like 35 degrees was the coldest temp, and this is a 20-degree setup, and I was as warm as I ever was in any other hammock setup. However, I could definitely tell that I would not trust this in real winter conditions. I wouldn't want to be trying to monkey around with all the different hookups and trying to dial it in where the quilt was really giving me enough warmth. One of the other things that was kind of annoying about the Banyan, or really any bridge hammock in comparison to a gathered end style, is I really like in the morning time to be able to relax in my hammock drink some coffee, have a drink or whatever, and watch, you know, the birds or the squirrels or whatever running around and doing their thing. Well, in this hammock, it's kind of got the same issue where you really don't have back support or much of it, and you definitely don't have any neck support. So you can't really sit back. So then if you want to sit up and drink your coffee and use it as a chair with no back support and no head support, the other thing you're going to find is that this Dynaglide that kind of goes through here, because it goes all the way through, just like with the Banyan, it kind of cuts into your thighs. It cuts up into your hamstrings quite a bit. And so it'll become uncomfortable after a certain amount of time. So it's not a deal breaker, and obviously I'm sitting in it just fine right now. But, you know, if you're going to spend quite a lot of time sitting there wanting to watch, you know, the birds or whatever, whether it's at night in the dark or if it's in the morning while you're getting ready to go for your next day of hiking, yeah, this just isn't comfortable after about 15-20 minutes. So something to think about. All right, guys, so the bug net on this is this bottom entry bug net. When you get in the hammock, you pull this up and over you, and then you cinch it up. So as you can tell, it's a little bit annoying, especially for me, where I'm used to my zippered bug nets, and they just seem more clean and more simple. But what I thought was going to be really, really annoying using this thing turned out to actually be kind of a blessing. At nighttime, I didn't realize how annoying it was to have to unzip and zip things. This thing's great. You just put your legs out and there's no noise. You just get out, go to the bathroom, and come back in. Same thing in the morning. You're not going to wake anybody up by unzipping this, getting out, going, you know, and doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? You can be as quiet as you want. Now, setup is another thing of a little bit of a concern if you're worried about time and how much fiddling around you have to do. So when you set this up, you really need a real flat lay. You need it to be even at that end and at this end. You also, to get the perfect setup for your head, you have to mess around with this end point and decide how loose you want this or how tight you want this. And that'll dictate how much of a cup this gives you versus how far down it'll go. And then obviously we already went over how to set up the quilt, but the quilt itself takes quite a bit of time to get dialed in the way you want. When you add all those factors together, you end up having to spend quite a bit of time dialing this in. Now, when I set it up, I usually set it up for a few days. I didn't do any, long backpacking trips with it, so I didn't have too much of a problem with it. But I could see where on a backpacking trip, that would be one of the factors I'd have to consider is how much effort do I want to put in to setting up and tearing down my hammock setup. Alright, so it's been a long video, guys, but let me just summarize this and get to the point. The hammock sleeps great, okay? You've got a couple issues with it. Mainly, the underquilt solution could be better. It's definitely not a winter setup. You're only going to use this in conditions where you think it's not going to really dip below freezing. You set up a 20-degree quilt, 20-degree top quilt, and you could take this thing down to 30 degrees without a problem, but I wouldn't push it really much farther than that, and I don't think you can really get a perfect seal. For the summertime, that actually might be a good thing. This is going to be probably one of the best options you can get for a summertime setup. You'll get good venting. You'll get, definitely the best lay you're going to find. And the other issue is obviously this and the bar, both this and the bar getting in your way a little bit. So when you're sleeping, you got to realize you can't just pop your head up and you got to swing your legs around that and make sure that you're not, bumping into those things. And while I say that, keep in mind, I get up 2-3 times a night to go to the bathroom without a doubt. I pound water while I'm out there, or maybe I have a drink or two or something with the guys. And so I get up and I like to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Gives me a chance to kind of look around and stuff. And I didn't find it to be too much trouble to deal with those things. So if you're somebody who's going to get in your hammock, go to sleep, and you just want to zonk out the whole night, this will work great. The bottom line, it's not a perfect setup, but it's definitely the best sleeping setup that I've found. So it probably won't replace my Chameleon for every adventure, but I think this will be definitely one of my go-to hammock setups for specifically for the summer. So I'm going to leave the link to all of Bill's stuff down in the description below. And take a look at his spread. He's got a spreadsheet for you to kind of look at all the different options that he has. And you can always email him. The guy is awesome to deal with, by the way. Bill is great. Really, really nice guy. So just email him or whatever. Talk with him. Find him on the forums. Whatever you want to do. I mean, if you got questions, he will give you the most detailed response back with pictures and everything else. He's got a couple videos out there if you want to see how to really dial in your underquilt. He's got all sorts of things out there. So check out his YouTube channel and check out his website. And I'd say if you're looking for the best sleep in the woods, this is it. See you guys. Bye.